So I'm going to talk about my story because the last Facebook Live I did, I said, when I invited people to the YouTube channel, I was inviting them to the YouTube channel to hear my story. So that's where I think we're going to start is how did I end up in this place? So a few months ago, I was invited to speak at a women's conference in the Willis, Texas. And the event organizer was very specific on what she wanted me to talk about. She had seen me present at a prior event, and she was excited and said, I want you to do that same presentation at my conference. Well, I kind of skirted around that because that presentation was a very vulnerable moment for me, and I didn't know if I was ready to tell the story again. But she was very specific. She continued to say, I want you to tell that story. I even want you to use the same PowerPoint presentation that you used in the previous event. So begrudgingly, I did all of that, showed up and gave the presentation. But here's the part of it that I think was so profound to me. The presentation was all about my story. It was titled The Beauty of Brokenness. And several points in my life, I have been broken. And it was actually the brokenness that pushed me to start speaking. It was the brokenness that really laid the foundation for who I am right now today, the woman that I am becoming. So after that presentation, there were ladies in the room that have followed me for years. They've been to events. They could probably tell you every tagline. They could share my messages with you probably better than I could share them myself. But they said to me, we never heard that story. We've never heard that part of your story. We've never heard that part of your story. Like I was hearing that over and over again to the point where I was like, how have you not heard that part of my story if you've been following me for all of this time? So that said something to me. And what it showed me was that I do not share my story enough. I kind of shy away from sharing really what brought me to this point because when you look back, it causes you to remember some internal narratives that you once spoke to yourself. I once looked at myself through the lens of fear. I looked at myself through the lens of people pleasing. I looked at myself through the lens of insecurity, not being enough, just all of the things that life had taught me is how I saw myself. And every time I revisit my story, it brought all of that back again. So I just didn't share it. I stopped sharing it and kind of got away from it. The more my platform grew, the more I started talking about other things, the more I started crafting messages based on the theme of the event that I was going to. But what I learned that day in the Woodlands was that my story still matters. My story still has impact. My story still has a voice, and my story still has to be told. So let's get into the story. I am a motivational speaker, award-winning motivational speaker. I'm an author. I'm a coach. I'm a consultant. I'm a leadership development coach as well. In my career, I work as a corporate trainer, HR person, all the things. But I have not always been this woman. I started as an sexually abused young girl from the ages of 6 to 13. I had some traumatic things that happened in the beginning of my life that really laid the foundation for how I moved through every other relationship in my life. I learned from 6, 7, 8, 9 years old how to carry the weight of an adult while being a child. And I tell people all the time, honey, I've been grown since I was 7. I have been carrying adult responsibilities since I was 7 years old. And you might say, well, how is that? It's because in those formative years, that's where our framework, if you think about it in the sense of building a house, there's a foundation that's laid, and then there's a framework for the house. There's a frame for the house. Everything else that's added to that is what makes the house the structure that it becomes. Well, your life is no different. In your formative years, you're laying the foundation and building a framework for what's to come. So the framework and foundation of my house as a woman had been people pleasing. It had been attached to, in order to be accepted or in order to be received, you had to give something. You had to give of yourself. So very early, I learned that very, very early in life from that traumatic situation. Moved on from that, and I think that kind of catapulted me into the next thing. And I tell this story all the time about a really bad game of truth or dare. I wrote about it. It's in a book somewhere. But it was a really, really, really bad game of truth or dare. And the foundation of that game was that the people that were playing the game were quote unquote cool kids. And they invited me into the game knowing that I had no idea what I was about to step into. So everyone that was there, they knew what they were doing, but I didn't know what I was doing. So it was a spin the bottle. Y'all know how truth or dare is played. So they spin the bottle pointed at me, and they dared. And it was so, now that I think about it, I think about it as the craziest thing to ever do. But the dare came, and everyone said, "We dare you to do it." And I didn't know what do it meant, but everybody else in the circle did. Long story short, August the 20th, 1990, I'll never forget it. It was the day that MC Hammer debuted on the Oprah Winfrey Show. While he was walking across the stage singing "Can't Touch This," then yeah, I was doing it. Well, fast forward from that, I got pregnant. So at 15, I was pregnant with my first son. That situation added to what had already been laid, the foundation that had been laid from previous things in my life. So I played that narrative over and over and over in my head. Move into college, my college days, dealt with alcohol abuse, to the point of probably almost losing my life to alcohol poisoning. And that entire situation was again around being accepted, was around giving to be enough for the crowd. So people pleasing, rejection, fear, low self-esteem. I mean, I could go on and on and on with all the things that framed my story. But here's where it took a turn. In my early 20s, I was probably about 20, I'm going to say 24, 25. I was searching for something to fill a void. Like I just knew life had to have more than what I was experiencing. By that time, I was married, had a second kid. So I was a mom, I was a wife, I had a career, I had started working in healthcare, and I just knew that there had to be more to life. And it was in that moment that my internal dialogue shifted. I started seeing myself not through the lens of what had happened in my life, but I started seeing myself through the lens of what I wanted my life to become. And that little switch, and I don't know when it happened, I don't know how it happened. All I know is that it happened. And it was that switch that literally changed everything in my life. So I remember, I'm from Houston, Texas, and there's an intersection at Sam Houston Tollway and 249. There's a Shell gas station on the right-hand side. I'll never forget it. I was sitting at that light, and I said to God, there has to be more to life than this. It has to be more to life. I had left work that day at lunch looking for a women's Bible study, and I felt like if I could just get to a group of women, that they would help me, that they would tell me what I was supposed to do to get out of the rut that I was in. Went to the Bible study, child, and it was horrible. When I say horrible, I was so angry. First of all, I gave up my lunch hour to come to this Bible study. They did have good snacks, but I did not, it did not give me what I was looking for. I was angry. And when I came to that intersection, I remember sitting there and I'm like, God, there has to be more to my life than this. Like, what am I looking for? And I heard that little voice. Oh, it gives me goosebumps when I think about it still. I heard that little voice that said, you're looking for what you are to be to other women. And I heard it, but I'm like, what? What does that mean? And then right after that, I heard you are to empower, inspire, encourage, and motivate women through the words that you speak, through the words that you write, and through the life that you live. Okay, so remember all the stuff I told you to just happen? That was my early 20s. I didn't like my own life. So you want me to write about it? You want me to talk about it? You want me to what? Speak about it? None of that. Like that was so far from my mind at that time that I couldn't even see myself in those things, right? However, I do remember so clearly, and I wrote it down, and I wish to this day I could find the journal I wrote it in. Let me put a pin there. When you hear that little voice and you know the voice is the voice of God, that's what it is to me, and you can call it whatever it is to you, write down what you're hearing because that voice is not obligated to repeat itself to you again. And you want to capture that moment. You want to capture it. You want to be able to go back to it. Although I wrote it down, I don't know where the journal is that I wrote it down in, but I captured it and I wrote it down. And it became my anchor. It became what grounded me. And it's what helped me change the narrative that I had been speaking to myself since I was 6, 7 years old. And that was my early 20s. So I'm saying 24, 23, 24, 25, somewhere like that. Because honestly, I didn't think I would live beyond 25. I never thought I would live beyond 25. I remember my 25th birthday, I sat at the table and cried because I didn't know what was going to be next because I never expected to live beyond 25. So this had to be in my very early 20s, that foundation and that framework, although it was there, what was being built around it was so much different than what I was seeing in my mind. That narrative has to change. Whatever you're telling yourself about yourself, if it is not speaking to the true identity of who you are, you have to change that narrative. And that's where the healing begins. That's where you start to go from just having situations happen in your life to having a story that impacts other women. So how did I end up at this place, at this point in life, sharing my story, sharing it from a place that it no longer impacts me negatively, but it's like my momentum, it propels me, it motivates me when I think back on where I was when I was 7, where I was when I was 13, where I was when I was 15, where I was when I was 19, where I was when I was 25, and I look at my life now, I know without a shadow of a doubt that everything had to happen in order for me to sit here today and be an award-winning speaker and be an author and be a coach and a consultant. My life has become the blueprint for other women to be able to live their life victoriously. So I promise to share my story. There's a lot of other ins and outs and different parts of it, but that's literally where I started speaking. I started just telling my story. It was 2017 when I started this journey of professional speaking, being a coach, a consultant, all the things. And my speaker coach at the time, she asked me, she said, "Why are you not telling your story?" And I said, "Because no one has invited me." And she stood there and looked at me. She said, "You don't need an invitation. Create your own stage. Create your own stage and tell your story." So when you change the narrative of what you're saying to yourself, not only are you creating your own stage to stand and to speak and to help others, but you're also putting a blueprint out there for another woman to follow. So once that narrative changes, healing begins and you're able to move forward and share your story. So that's my story. I want to know what your story is. What's your story? What is the internal dialogue that you need to change to see yourself differently, to see who you really are? We'll come back another time and we'll talk about identity because that is so important that you really understand who you are as a woman. You understand who you are as a person. You understand what your purpose is, what your calling is, what are you passionate about? What sets your soul on fire? What makes you, I say this to people all the time, like, what is it that you could wake up? I could wake you up in the middle of the night and you could talk about it passionately. For me, It is fearless living. It is overcoming fear. It is moving beyond what you have gone through into who you are becoming. I'm telling you, when I stopped looking at my story as what happened to me, but started looking at it as what happened to me has caused me to become who I am today, I can talk about it at any point with anybody at any time. So we'll come back and talk about that. We'll come back and talk about identity, but stay with me. Stay with me. Watch this journey with me. We're going to have some fun conversations, some good conversations. One thing I can tell you about me is that I'm transparent. I'm vulnerable. I tell probably too much sometimes, but at the end of the day, I share so that you will have a blueprint to get some different results in your life. So until we're back on this platform again, I want you to stay unboxed, be unbothered, and whatever you do, do it afraid. I am Shaundra Dineen. Talk to y'all later.